We're in the third part of a series on eliminating hurry. And no joke here. I'm not trying to be funny. But I got about halfway through this and I thought, when is this series good? When am I going to be able to bring this to a close? Looking ahead. Wasn't really in a hurry, but I was looking past what was here to the next thing. It's part of a symptom of a hurried heart and condition, and we've talked about that over the last couple of weeks. That hurry is not necessarily, and we'll say it a bunch today, but it's not necessarily the pace with which you do things. It is the condition of your heart as you do them. Oftentimes, that is, you can do things in a quickened pace without being hurried, and you can feel hurried even though you're going slowly. So it is a condition. It's really a heart condition. And I hope that you pay attention to the lyrics of the songs, because I was just struck this morning about how, if what we're saying in these songs is true, and it is, we can very much trust the vetting process that Mike goes through in terms of making sure that the songs are based in Scripture, that they're heralding truth and not just accolades that would make us feel better. Then there's a life that can be engaged. And that's really the message of this church right now, is that we want to call people to engage a new life, not just adopt a religious behavior. And that brings us to a point where we can become fundamentally different kinds of people. I'm not talking about changing your personality. I'm not talking about changing the core of who God designed you to be, but some of the things that are in us need to be changed. And we would all admit that there's nothing... Not one of us who would stand up today and say, well, I'm perfect just like I am. One of my issues has been hurry. And I have really been, through the gist of my life, I don't really know where it came from, but found myself living at a pace internally that is not healthy. It's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for the people around me. And when I hurry, and when I'm hurried, when my focus becomes this obsessive focus on the clock, the people around me pay a price. And it can be a dear price at sometimes, because they become an impediment to the clock that I'm trying to bow down to and keep. And so I can be harsh, I can be grumpy, I can be demanding, I can be a lot of things, but in those moments I'm probably not a lot of fun to be around, especially if my hurry is not getting us on the pace that I want us to keep. Okay? So because I have bowed down to the clock at those moments, as all important as this godlike figure over my life, and made it a God to be served, then everything else becomes kind of lesser to that, and actually can become impediments or blocks to the real thing that I want to advance. And it's a sickness. It can really be a bad thing. And when I'm in a hurry, I make mistakes. I don't know about you, but when I'm in a hurry, I make mistakes, almost always. Those mistakes can be as simple as, although incredibly frustrating, because this has happened on multiple occasions, getting all the way to church, walking in my office and realize I left my laptop at home at 9825 Southwest Highway K4. That's 12 minutes from here, one way. And see my clock obsession? It just comes out. It just oozes. Or it could be as detrimental as backing right up into the bumper of somebody parked behind me because I didn't take the time to look behind me. There's probably 3 or 4 people who could raise their hands, have been victims of such. Kelsey, you didn't have to raise it before I asked for you to raise your hand. We were going to let you remain anonymous. But I would certainly, I want to certainly maintain. I had a couple people approach me with this after the first part of this series. And they're like, but being punctual is important. It's a good thing. I was like, absolutely. Absolutely. Punctuality is I'm not advocating that we are discard this notion of being on time or being aware of it. Punctuality and consideration of others who may be waiting on us it's a good and godly approach to life, but you can do that without hurrying. That's what I'm discovering. We can maintain that awareness. We can move through life and not be dictated by the clock and still maintain the value on punctuality and the consideration of others. And the coolest thing in the world, the thing that really grips me, is that when you look at the life of Jesus, this is what he modeled. He never, ever indicates that he was late or hurried anywhere that he went. But being considerate of others' times and being punctual doesn't demand that we hurry ourselves or those who are with us. It's almost an inevitable byproduct. If you hurry yourself, you will tend to hurry those around you, because especially if they're going with you in the same direction. That's why family vacations, I'm not talking about with the 6 people in my family, but when we start getting aunts and uncles and their cousins involved. And then, have you ever been in that situation where they all decide to go somewhere? So have you ever tried to get 20 people to go one place at one time? What's that like? See, I know a lot of you have done that. That is one of the most, for a hurried person, a time-obsessed person, one of the most frustrating things in the world. I would sit down and literally say, I'm not going to try, because I couldn't do it. But I would sit there and just boil and seethe with this anxiety and like, oh, we need to go. What are they doing? I would watch people walk by like, where are they going? We're supposed to be leaving. What are they doing over there making toast? Why are we doing this? And we were supposed to be going this direction. And nowhere in that is a consideration for people. It really has been a freeing thought process to move in this direction. We can change our habits, right? We can adopt new habits. We can do new things. We can function differently in terms of the mechanics of our lives, but hurry is not a mechanical thing. Over and over and over, we need to get that. Hurry is a condition of our heart. It's an internal condition. It's something that is within us. It's an attitude, a perspective, a lens that we look through, and a heart condition that we've taken on. And that, so we can't change our habit. We can change our habits, but we really can't change our hearts. We can try to deny our hearts. We can try to function in opposition to our hearts, but how well does that work for you in every other area of life? To do something that is in conflict with your heart, it never sustains itself. And even if it did, it would not be an enjoyable experience. It's never pleasurable when your heart is set on something that you continually have to deny. Hopefully, what always happens, and the whole ambition and the call to ministry at this church, is that when we engage Jesus, we begin following him, one thing that we are so excited about is that he can change the condition of our hearts. So I'm hopeful today that in my life, as I practice obedience to Jesus, as I yield my life to him in increasing obedience to him, that he can change this hurry sickness in my life. Not just simply dictating what I should do. That is, it's not an uncommon thought process to say, oh, I shouldn't hurry. God is in heaven saying, Casey, you shouldn't hurry. And so I feel guilty, I feel pressure, I feel scolded, I feel all of these things as I try but fail to not be a certain way, and I continually end up yielding to what? To my heart. So we have a Jesus who is alive from the dead, who is off of that cross, who has walked out of a tomb, who has ascended to heaven, who has come in form of the Holy Spirit to indwell everybody who would trust him, to say, I can change the condition of your heart, not just the habits of your hand. So today I speak with great hope that I think in various degrees we all struggle and are all affected by this hurry sickness and about the pace of life that we keep, whether it's simply having to be busy doing something all of the time or continually like more on that more abrasive end of my life where I'm trying to get everywhere on time and bring everybody with me, and no matter whether it's kicking, screaming, or mad or crying. So there's just a huge range here. See, living in God's kingdom, practicing obedience to Jesus, leads to this renewed condition of our hearts. And hurry has no place in this new life we live with God. Hurry has no place in this life. It really doesn't. And as I say that, I'm just continually got to be up front with you that I'm not there yet, okay? I tell you on both sides of this as I preach, if something has been a reality for me and I've experienced transformation, I can share that in humility and the grace of God, giving credit where credit is due. It's not with me. But I also pledge to share with you where I'm not there. This is not me yet. I'm even through this series, I'm noticing a change in my heart. Now we're a long ways from where I hope to be and where I think God would have me go, but there's already been transformation. That's so exciting to see. Is hurry this internal condition? If hurry is, let's ask this question, if hurry is more of an internal condition or a state of mind, might be a good way to say that, than it is the actual pace that we move with. So let me say it again. If hurry is a state of mind or an internal condition more than it is the pace that we move through life with, what is the most important thing we can do to begin eliminating it? What can you do if you just say step one? Because listen, how's it going to work if I just say, we need to all stop hurrying? Listen, I've tried that for a long time. And you can ask my family, it doesn't work. Just try to stop hurrying. Why? Why is that impossible? Because of what we've said 4 or 5 times already, because hurry was the condition of my heart. It's not the pace that I keep. I can sit in the front seat of the van, quote unquote, patiently, and be very, very hurried. Now, I've made a pledge to not go back inside and say, are y'all coming? Or I've even gotten nicer than that. Is there anything I can do to help you get ready? My family all knows what that means. That means hurry up. I'm tired of waiting on you. I'm so tired that I'll even help you do what you need to do to get out to the van. You need me to brush your teeth? I'll be glad to brush your teeth while you comb your hair, and we'll get there on time. It's a sickness. It's not the pace, it's the condition, right? So there's hope because our hearts can change. They literally can change. And so there's a way to eliminate hurry as this inner condition of our hearts apart from just trying to manage our behaviors. But I will tell you this. Here's the first step. The first step is to do what Exodus chapter 20 and verses 8 through 10 say, and we're just going to read verse 8. But it says this. I want you to just, if you would, just close your eyes for a minute and just hear these words and let them hit you like you've never heard them before. Because here's, when Moses went up on the mountain and he received the 10 Commandments, here is the third commandment given to us. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall do your labor and do your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. Father, I've only begun to understand this after decades of following Jesus. I never knew hurry was a problem in my relationship with you and others, but I'm so thankful that you put your finger on it and said, Casey, this can change. And I'm so thankful that we're in a church family where we can talk about this and where we together can move forward. Wherever we are in this problem, in this spectrum of hurrying in our culture, I pray that you would take us to the next step and bring us more peace and more rest and more patience and more trust in the pace that you keep, Jesus. So I thank you, and I ask you to speak to us in the great name of Jesus. Amen. There are 2 really important things that we need to know and remember regarding this commandment. There are probably more than 2, okay? But I'm going to talk to you about 2 that I think are really, really crucial about this commandment. In fact, this first part is true of all the commandments, but I want to call it to mind here because it is overwhelmingly likely that when we hear the commandments, we hear do's and don'ts, a list of conduct that God prefers and conduct that God does not prefer, and that we are to know and toe the line. That is, when you go into a first grade classroom, they have the rules, classroom rules, do this, don't do this. And we can see these as one-dimensional as God's rules, okay? The problem with a rule, honestly, is, and this is true in a first grade classroom or in the kingdom of God, the problem with a rule is that the rule is primarily the preference and to the benefit of the rule keeper or giver, okay? And you say, well, okay, he's God. He gets right. He is God, and it can be for his preference. It can be for his benefit. But did you know the glorious thing about these commandments is they're not just given for God's out of his preference. They're given to us as a way of life that is preferred and better beyond all. So as we read the commandments, he is describing who he is and what life can and should be like in his kingdom. So it is a way of life of God's kingdom. As Mike talked about, we're entering into a kingdom, a life that is here and now, not just a future life that when we die we go there. Absolutely, we have that hope of heaven. Absolutely, there's life beyond this physical life. But we don't have to wait. We don't have to start when we die. We can begin that now. And so the Ten Commandments, including this one, are prescriptive for that life. That is, God is saying, here's how you live that life now. And that's very different than saying, if I'm a Christian, here's what I should and shouldn't do. We won't say can and can't because we know we'll break these. We say we should and shouldn't. These are the shoulds and shouldn'ts of God. And instead, he says this about this. He says, remember the Sabbath day. Remember it. To keep it holy. 6 days you can do your work, but on the seventh, how about let's rest? You can hear that from the all-authoritative sovereign God of the universe saying, I desire this for you. I want this for you. This is what life in the rhythm of my kingdom is like. Now, this shouldn't be something we should have to be talked into, is it? We're like, we got to rest. How many of you have a hard time? Don't raise your hands and tell me. How many of you have a hard time resting? I mean, even if you're still, right? Even if you're still, you're doing something mentally. How many of you have been so mentally fatigued your body begins to feel that? That you begin to feel physically tired because you're mentally exhausted. You know, one practice of that you may have all experienced is driving. If you drive a long period of time, it's not physically demanding, right? You're not exerting a lot of muscle or cardio or anything. But if you drove, 8 or 9 hours, you're going to be tired because mentally you have to be so alert to stay on the road and not have a wreck. And it can be exhausting. So sometimes you can be very still and be anxious and be hurried and be wearied. And the Bible is talking about this rest that is all-encompassing. And it's just talking about what life looks like in the kingdom, that we don't have to live at that pace and in that way. We just simply don't. So it's important to remember that the Sabbath day and holding it as sacred, and that practice can bring balance and perspective to our day-to-day life. We begin to live this way in the rhythm of God's kingdom right here and right now. And this would obviously go well in a sermon series on the whole what life is like in the kingdom by looking at the commandments from that perspective. I know we're just taking a slice today, but I want you to look at the slice and just say, what would it be like if God is saying, this is the best way to live? This is my prescribed life for you, that you would take one day of the week, which he modeled, right? God modeled in the creation and rested from it, ceased his labor, ceased his work. And he said, you can live this same way too. You can live. And I think that there are times, and I just tell them myself, that when I know I'm tired, this happens a lot with my work, just in terms of ministry. And I know I need a break, and then I take a break, and I feel guilty for taking the break. That's not good, right? That's the difference than being lazy and saying, I just don't feel like doing anything today, so I won't do it. But it is keeping the work schedule, keeping the pace of life, doing the things that we have to do, and then feeling guilty when we are prescribed by God himself a day that we don't do that, where we rest, where we pull back. So it is, all I'm saying in this first part and how to understand the commandment is a way of life. He's not talking about what we shouldn't do, but more about how we can live. And that is a big change in terms of how we view the commandment. But the second thing I said is important is to remember that this commandment, all of the commandments, but specifically this one is unique in the way we look at it. It is for our benefit and blessing. Now, the reason I say it's unique to this is because this got all out of kilter, especially in Jesus' time. He had more confrontation with the Jewish religious leaders over breaking the Sabbath than almost anything else that you might notice through the Scriptures, other than calling himself God and making himself equal, which is what ultimately got him killed. But he would do these things, he would practice, he would do a healing, he would make provision, and the Jews would get mad, the Jewish leaders of that day would get mad at him saying he was breaking the Sabbath. All right, so whether it was a blind person that was healed or a lame person that got up and walked and actually carried his pallet. That happened one time. There was a paralytic who walked away from the moment of healing and carried his pallet away. And the Jewish religious leaders got upset and declared that he was breaking the Sabbath. Why? Because he was carrying his pallet on the Sabbath. And you know what his response was when they confronted him? The man who made me well said, pick up your pallet and go home. So I did it. I mean, I was paralyzed, and he made, you do with it what you will, basically. But I'm just carrying my pallet and going home. That's how ridiculous it had gotten, that it literally got to the point where the perspective of the religious leaders of the day was that man existed for the benefit and the glory of the Sabbath. Okay? You see that? Man, their view was, we exist to uphold and benefit and glorify the Sabbath. That's what they said. But Jesus said in Mark chapter 2 and verse 27, he said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for our benefit, not we for the benefit of the Sabbath. An easy trip to get followed into. The moment we begin to do that, we'll know it's pretty easy to identify if we're getting this reversed, just like the Jewish religious leaders did of that day. We'll get it mixed up easily when we start saying, well, can I do this or can I do that? When we start itemizing things, or we start feeling guilty because we did something or didn't do something. Now, again, I'm not saying, I don't want to make the Sabbath sound so lackadaisical that it's not significant. It needs to be approached, obviously, with a profound sense of reverence and focus. But when we begin to reduce it to a list of rules of do's and don'ts, and guilt begins to enter in, or embarrassment because we got caught doing something on the Sabbath or whatever, then we know we're going in the wrong direction that way. So, as we think about observing the Sabbath, that even sounds, I don't know, that just doesn't, we know if someone were saying that to me, do you observe the Sabbath? It just hits me with a legalistic tone in terms of how it sounds. But that's what the commandment says. It says observe it, keep it holy, which means sacred, to observe, to remember it, to call it to mind, to be intentional about engaging it. But when you say, do you observe the Sabbath, it almost sounds like a litmus test of how spiritually committed you are, or what flavor of Christianity you embrace, or all kinds of strange things that might not have anything to do with what this is about. So I want to read this. Let me read this out of the New Living, or the Today's Living Bible. Here's how Mark chapter 2 verse 27 sounds. I think this is a very good statement about our rendition of it. But the Sabbath was made to benefit man, and not man to benefit the Sabbath. Now I want you to think about that, because you could just hear the preacher say that and not take it in. The Sabbath was created by God for the benefit and the blessing of man. Man was not created by God to benefit and bless the Sabbath. So when Jesus was getting indicted over and over for doing good things on the Sabbath, it was a clear indication that the religious elite of that day had gotten this totally backwards and said, you're not benefiting the Sabbath. And so there was a time when Jesus said, hey, if your ox fell into a ditch on the Sabbath, wouldn't you get it out? Well, the answer is clearly yes. They wouldn't say, well, we can't do anything, it's the Sabbath. They would rescue their farm animal. He said, so it's obviously okay to do good on the Sabbath. Obviously, because it exists for our benefit. So what we're talking about here today is not a rule to keep, it's a life to enter, and the life to enter is for your benefit. It's a better life. It's a good way of living. Now, it is hard to do in this culture. We are going to struggle unless we let Jesus do this in us. That is, if we just simply try to mechanically observe the Sabbath and say, all right, every Sunday, if you pick Saturday, I don't care if you pick Wednesday, quite honestly, but there needs to be a day that you say, well, every day, let's just say Sunday, every Sunday when we get home, we can't do anything. And I could see somebody saying, well, what if we got to do laundry? Or what if that's our only day to mow the yard? Or what if the car's broken, we can't fix it? Or, and we begin to go down that road. Now, I want you to hear Jesus say, because I'm not going to say, yes, this is okay, and no, this is okay, because that would sound a lot like the Pharisees, right? They kept those rules. What we would say is, can you mark off in your heart this day as holy and sacred and dedicated to God in a unique way? And should be characterized by the fact that we cease from our regular work schedule and approach to life to a rhythm that is slower and more intentionally given to God and focused on capturing rest. We say, well, Jesus didn't rest when he was healing people. That's the point, is that when we begin to be that legalistic about it, it begins to be flipped. Then we exist for the Sabbath and not the Sabbath for us. So there is no way. I thought about this, and I have a lot to learn. I will tell you that about this. But as from where I stand right now, I do not want to prescribe to you any form or notion of things you can and can't do on the day. If we could start as a church family and as individuals and families just by saying this day is going to be unique. It's going to be uniquely dedicated and focused on God no matter what we do. And we want it to be characterized by a cessation or stopping of the regular rhythm of work in our life. If something comes, don't save car repairs for the Sabbath. Okay, if you can do it on the day before, Saturday or whatever, do it then. If you don't save. Now, I particularly, for one, find mowing my lawn incredibly relaxing. It's one of my favorite things to do, quite honestly. It would be a very restful thing for me to do. And as I listen to music and as I'm outside, you see what I'm saying? There's not a way I can say this is good, this is bad. And I being rather young in terms of not my age, but in my approach to this, would never say, thus saith, anything right here. But I have a very growing knowledge of this. And I'm kind of inviting, many of you are well ahead of me on this. I get that. I understand that. So I want to keep this in terms of a perspective that we embrace, all right? Do we do this? Would you be willing to say, this day is marked off in my life and our family's life to keep it holy or dedicated to God, sacred in its nature and how we do life? And then begin to outflow, out of the flow of that life and that commitment, decide what each one of those Sabbath days begins to look like for you. I can see families taking walks. I can see families sitting down to watch a movie together. Or maybe families saying, this is a no technology day for us. I could see a trip to the lake. I could see hopes and dreams conversations around the table with a spouse. There are a lot of things that we can envision that would reset the pace of our life and our rhythm. Because I will tell you that it doesn't just happen to pastors or CEOs in terms of burnout in life. I think there are a lot of people walking around burnt out. I think it's so common that it's almost normal. That is, the zeal for life, the energy for pursuing hopes and dreams, the joy, the peace is gone. Because we don't live life like God has prescribed that we live life. Doesn't that look a lot different than if somebody says, do you keep the Sabbath? Versus, have you ever practiced? Have you ever engaged? And have you ever just set aside a day of the week and made it wholly dedicated to God? Where you just let God begin to be your ultimate focus. And here's the deal is, in day-to-day life, there are so many things that are grabbing at your attention, right? Whether it's school or job or anything. There's so many. On the Sabbath, you can structure your day so that those things don't compete, but that you choose things that help you actually focus on God instead of get distracted. And focus in on Him and become aware of Him. If you got creative as a family, this is one thing. I don't necessarily have it on the listening guide, but what about if you and your family said, you sat down and said, what would help us do that? And you just listened to your kids, and your kids listened to you, or your spouse, and you shared, or you just got a best friend even, and just said, hey, let's have this. What would help you focus? What would make this day special in terms of being able to focus on God? What would come out of those kind of conversations? I think it would be beautiful. I really do. So keeping the Sabbath helps us set a rhythm, and it helps us set a pace to life that is healthy and restorative, and then maintain our focus on the King and what life is like in His kingdom. I would certainly invite you to look at all of the commandments in this vein. Okay, so we're just picking one out. This is not the only, all of the commandments have this ability to engage them at this way. But here's the reality. Here's the reality is we're busier than we've ever been in the United States of America as a people. At the very same time, we have more objects and more technology designed for our convenience and designed to make life easier. And how many of the very things that are for our benefit have we taken and turned into objects that actually make us busier and more tired? So how many of you have stayed up way past when you need to stay up because you couldn't get off your favorite form of social media? Or because somebody wouldn't stop texting you every time you try? Ba-pling. There's a little thing here I sometimes use. I use it every Sunday, that little mute button. And sometimes this thing but at the same time, the convenience this has done, the way I've prepared sermons here, I've communicated with family from here, the blessing that technology has brought is huge. I mean, I don't deny that a bit. But we have all these things at our disposal, and we're still worn out. And we're still busier than we've ever been. And we're still tired and exhausted. And I would maintain, if we're ever going to step out of that, ever going to have a chance to get off that conveyor belt, that the first thing we have to do is say, let's observe the Sabbath. Let's take one day and recognize God uniquely in it as a person and as a family. And then you begin to have conversations about what that looks like. I really do encourage you to not come up with a rule of do's and don'ts, but it's simply of things that might help you maintain a restful, peace-filled day focused on Jesus. I think it would be beautiful. So I want to show you a video here, and we're going to just close out with that, and I'm going to make a couple observations at the end, okay? So watch this video with me.
All this can be yours for just 4 payments of $79.90.
So I'd ask you to write it down right now. Write Psalm 27:4 down. And as you discuss, and if you need as you discuss and ask questions and plan as a family or individuals, just keep reading that over and over again and saying, let that be definitive for how we do the Sabbath. It's not about what you don't do. It's about the focus. It's about that one thing. Practicing the Sabbath and keeping it holy. And on that day, what it means to live differently. Here's some things that I just thought of. These are just me to focus on. You could ask yourself, take time to maybe take a walk out back or sit on the back porch or front porch or wherever you can be, maybe by yourself for a few minutes and say, what is my relationship with God and others like right now? And just invite God to speak into your life at that moment. What if you just said, this day, it's going to be slower? Did you notice all the things? I couldn't find a thing on that list that went through that I don't struggle with. I mean, I thought of a faucet that needs to be fixed. I thought of an aspect of part of my garage that's under disaster. I mean, and so when I carve out time to be still, my mind does that. It goes through that list. And the Sabbath is giving us permission to not go through the list, to not let that ruin the rest. What if you just made time to have friends present with you that you don't generally have time to do that with? Or family? Or what about if you just said, all right, this is going to be a day where I'm going to really practice. I'm going to really, not in a legalistic or exhausting way, but I'm going to be in the moment. Wherever I am, I'm just going to be there. I'm going to observe it and soak it in. You know, one of the things I thought, this really comes out of a book that I'm about to complete called Faithful Presence. But what would it be like if you took the Sabbath and at least a part of it and lived that day through the lens of a child? What if you just looked at the world from the perspective of a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old? Notice what they like. Notice what they notice. I think that would be pretty interesting. What if you just said, on the Sabbath, whatever I do, whatever I end up doing or not doing, so to speak, I'm going to do it with God. And my goal is just going to be awareness of God in all that I'm doing. So if I'm sitting on my front porch, one of my favorite things to do, and I can just see this happening when I get engaged, is to look at it's nothing but a grassy hill in front of us. And I love to look at that hill. There's nothing there. There's nothing to distract me except an occasional bird or flowers that bloom from time to time. And just be there and look at that hill and disengage from the garage, from the faucet. Oh, I could keep going. Starting to feel anxious right there, so I'll stop. And just be there and be present with Jesus and feel the peace that comes through that. To give ourselves permission, because God has prescribed it, to not do all the other stuff, but to be there with Him. Would you pray with me? Father, my guess is, the inclination at least I have for me, so I've got a long ways to go here to be able to do this in a way that is restful and restorative, that resets the pace and the rhythm of my life in your kingdom. God, I'm so excited about what I see and about the potential that you seem to be unveiling for this one simple thing of saying, rest. Be with me. And God, I'm thankful that we can throw the weight of our lives on your word and trust it to not only uphold us, to not only give us good direction, but to restore our souls, to renew us, to give us energy, to give us life and joy. I am so thankful today when we look at that commandment and it says to keep the Sabbath holy, to remember it all, that when we put the balance of our trust on there, when we literally bear down and practice that we're going to find life given to us, not taken from us. Well, that is an exciting, exciting truth that I'm only now really, really discovering. So thank you. Would you now bless this incredible congregation of people with a deep sense of permission and advocation of engaging what you've told us to engage and remembering the Sabbath, to keep it holy, to let it be sacred in our lives, to not let anything else interfere with it. Father, I know that in the past I would have guarded time to watch a favorite TV show or do other things, and I want to be even more fiercely protective of what you're asking us to do in this. So you help us, Father, and as we practice slowing down and being restfully aware of you, would you change and transform the condition of our hearts? Would you eliminate hurry as a way of life for us so that we can live at the pace of Jesus? We love you. We ask all of it in Jesus' great name.